Right now, the United States is conducting the most aggressive immigration crackdown in modern American history. Military planes are flying deportation missions. A 227-year-old wartime law has been dusted off for the first time since World War II, and the number of people crossing the southern border has dropped dramatically. But here's what most people aren't talking about. Behind the headlines, there's a much bigger story unfolding, one that involves constitutional battles, economic consequences, diplomatic standoffs, and a question that goes to the very heart of what America is. Today, we're going to break all of it down, with verified facts, official data, and both sides of the debate. Let's get into it. To understand what's happening right now, you need to understand how we got here. Immigration has been one of America's most heated political issues for decades. But in the last 10 years, it has become the defining issue. During Donald Trump's first term, from 2017 to 2021, we saw the beginning of the border wall, the Remain in Mexico policy for asylum seekers, travel bans on several countries, and a controversial family separation policy that sparked massive public backlash. When Joe Biden took office in 2021, he reversed many of those policies. Wall construction was halted, Remain in Mexico was ended, and a new system was created that allowed migrants to schedule asylum appointments through a government app. But border crossings surged. By fiscal year 2023, encounters at the southern border reached historic highs, over 2 million in a single year. By 2024, even the Biden administration began reimposing restrictions. But politically, the damage was done. Immigration became the #1 issue for many voters heading into the 2024 election. And when Donald Trump won the presidency again in November 2024, he made it clear the border was going to change on day one. And it did. On January 20th, 2025, his first day back in office, President Trump signed a series of executive orders that fundamentally reshaped U.S. border policy. First, he declared a national emergency at the southern border, unlocking emergency funding and military resources. Second, he ordered the deployment of active-duty U.S. military troops to the border, not just the National Guard. Third, the administration shut down the asylum appointment system overnight, canceling roughly 270,000 scheduled cases. Fourth, the Remain in Mexico policy was reinstated and expanded, forcing asylum seekers to wait outside the United States while their cases moved through immigration courts. Fifth, the U.S. refugee admissions program was suspended, and new travel bans were imposed on nationals of specific countries. And sixth, immigration enforcement inside the United States was dramatically expanded. Long-standing limits on enforcement near schools, churches, and hospitals were lifted. Within weeks, border crossing numbers began to fall sharply. Administration officials declared victory, arguing the border was finally being secured. On the surface, the numbers seemed to support that claim. But this is where we need to go deeper. Here's what most people missed. One of the most consequential actions wasn't visible at the border at all. It was legal. The administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a law written when the United States feared war with France. That law gives the president sweeping authority to detain and deport nationals of a country the U.S. is at war with, or that has invaded the United States. The last time it was used was during World War II, when it served as part of the legal basis for the internment of Japanese, German, and Italian nationals. In 2025, the administration used it again, not in a declared war, but to target members of a Venezuelan criminal gang, arguing that the group constituted an invasion. Supporters say the president has broad authority to act when national security is at risk, and that violent transnational gangs justify extraordinary measures. Opponents argue this is a dangerous expansion of wartime power that was never meant for immigration enforcement. Civil rights groups filed immediate legal challenges. Federal courts have already issued conflicting rulings, and the issue is widely expected to reach the Supreme Court. Why does this matter even if you're not an immigrant? Because whatever the courts decide will shape how much power any future president has to use emergency laws inside the United States. There's also an economic story unfolding, and it's already being felt. Many sectors of the U.S. economy rely heavily on immigrant labor: agriculture, construction, meatpacking, hospitality, and food service. Business groups have warned that aggressive enforcement could lead to labor shortages, higher consumer prices, and slower economic growth. Government budget analysts have consistently found that immigration contributes positively to long-term economic growth, tax revenue, and entrepreneurship. Supporters of the crackdown push back, arguing that American workers should fill these jobs, that wages have been suppressed, and that the costs of social services outweigh the benefits. The truth is, economists genuinely disagree, but what's clear is that the economic effects are real, measurable, and already underway. This story also reaches far beyond the U.S. border. When the administration began using military aircraft for deportations, Colombia initially refused to accept them. The response from Washington was swift: threats of major tariffs and visa restrictions. Colombia backed down almost immediately. The message was unmistakable. The United States was willing to use economic pressure to force immigration cooperation. Mexico has been forced into a delicate balancing act, cooperating enough to avoid retaliation while managing domestic backlash at home. Foreign policy experts warn that this approach may be effective in the short term, but could damage long-term relationships and push countries toward rival powers. Meanwhile, the legal system is under strain. Dozens of lawsuits are challenging the new policies. Judges across the country are weighing fundamental questions. Can wartime laws be used outside of war? Can asylum processing be ended by executive action alone? Can the military be used domestically without violating long-standing legal limits? And can birthright citizenship be altered without changing the Constitution? The answers will shape the balance of power in the United States for years to come. So what does all of this mean for real people? For workers, labor shortages and wage pressures are already emerging in some regions. For consumers, higher prices for food, housing, and services may follow. For immigrant communities, fear of separation has altered daily life, from school attendance to emergency medical care. Globally, the world is watching how far the United States is willing to go to enforce its borders. And for the legal system, a massive backlog ensures that justice is slow and uncertain for everyone involved. So let's bring this together. First, the United States is carrying out the most sweeping immigration enforcement operation in modern history. Border crossings are down, but the consequences are still unfolding. Second, this is not just a border story. It's a constitutional, economic, and diplomatic story whose effects will last long after this administration. Third, both sides of this debate are grounded in real data. Anyone telling you this issue is simple is leaving something out. Now, this next part is my opinion. I believe the most important things to watch aren't the border numbers themselves, but the court rulings and the economic data. That's what will determine whether these policies last or collapse under legal and economic pressure. All of the sources used for this analysis are listed below. I encourage you to verify everything for yourself. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe and turn on notifications. I post deep dive analysis like this every week. And let me ask you, do you think this approach to immigration is the right one? What would you do differently? I'll see you in the next one.